Hey there, YouTube. I have got another deck tech for today. I know it's been quite a while since I've done this, but I have an exciting one. It is my Frog Tribal Tatsunari Toad Rider deck. I've been working on this ever since Tatsunari came out. Initially, I had Atraxa as the commander a very long time ago, and when we got this, I knew that this had to be the frog commander. Having access to Sultai colors means that you get access to a lot of the good black frogs that you miss out on if you were to use, say, Grolnok, which I would say is the de facto best frog commander if you don't include colors. It's probably the most used one. I haven't checked, but I imagine it is. What is the goal with these fellas right here? Mainly it's Tatsunari, but we're going to get Kaimi in the mix as well. So the first line of text on Tatsunari here is that whenever you cast an enchantment, if you don't control the creature named Kaimi, which is right here, you create Kaimi, and then obviously it has the text of Kaimi on there, which is whenever you cast an enchantment spell, each opponent loses 1 life, gain 1 life. We don't really care about that. We just care that it makes a frog, which is very nice. We also care about this activated ability. This is actually probably the most important line of text on the card, which is for 1 and a green or blue, Tatsunari Toad Rider and target frog you control can't be blocked this turn except by creatures with flying or reach. That will allow you to have very evasive frogs. In this deck, we are going to draw cards off of attack and dealing damage triggers. We're going to try to sneak through Infect. They're going to have poison frogs, so I thought that was thematic. Let's move these lads out of the way. For our basics, I don't care about the basics or the lands in general. I will splay them out here, but we're not really going to go through them. Oops, missed an island. And some swamps. There will be a deck list in the description here that you can see. The majority of this is simply because these are the lands that I have on hand. I do not really care about lands in Commander. It's mostly for fun, so that's why I just kind of use what I've got. I do not have a Cavern of Souls. Obviously, if you have a Cavern of Souls, please put it in the deck. These two are exactly the same card. You will be naming Frog. Unfortunately, your commander is not Frog, so you can't use it there. However, with a very flexible 2 and a black casting cost, it's very unlikely that you're going to need those in order to cast your commander. We do play a few utility lands, though. So we have Karn's Bastion. I already talked about earlier. We are going to play some Infect. So this allows you to grind out late games with stalled board states by ticking up Infect every turn. We have Access Tunnel, which can allow you to give other creatures unblockable, maybe if Tatsunari has been taken out too many times. Now, we noticed that we play this over Rogue's Passage. I prefer this one because a lot of your frogs are very weak, so just keeping that 1 extra mana is really nice. Obviously, if you have a huge beater, you want to use the Tatsunari's ability, so I can see an argument for Rogue's Passage or not. I personally choose not to play it. We have Dakmor Salvage. We have some graveyard synergies, including the Gitrog monster, which allows you to loot through your entire deck if you go to your end step and have 8 cards in hand. It's a little niche combo we don't really plan on executing, however we make sure that we have access to it. Mortuary Mire. It's going to return a target creature from your graveyard to the top of your library. This is because we care so much about Grolnok. We have Cephalid Coliseum, which is just to help loot through the deck in a pinch. With Grolnok, we have access to every permanent that we mill, so this one allows us to just kind of loot through our deck a little bit better. And then we play a Lilypad Village. This is, again, just to help a little bit of surveil action. So how are we going to cast all of our spells? Well, we're going to ramp. We, first off, have the usual suspects of Soul Ring, Fellwar Stone, and Arcane Signet. We have Sanctum Weaver, Druid's Repository, Mark of Sakiko, Wild Growth, and Utopia Sprawl. You might notice, that's a lot of enchantments right there. We're not playing a lot of land ramp, and the answer is no, we're not. We would like to proc the first ability of Tatsunari as much as possible in order to get Kaimi back, because usually he will be sent into the foray to probably die. This one in particular is very interesting because it is for each creature that attacks. So you can get a lot of mana out of Druid's Repository, since the whole goal of this deck is to utilize your low-to-the-ground frogs to gain incremental advantage, because no one frog is particularly that good. And then obviously, Sanctum Weaver is pretty good at benefiting off of those enchantments as well. We have a little bit of frog ramp as a treat. We have Poison Dart Frog, which is just a really bad mana dork, but we love him because he's a frog. Clifftop Lookout, which is our only way of land ramping, and it reveals from the top until you find a land, puts it into tapped. It could be any land. It could be your utility lands. It could be it could be your command tower. It could be anything. And then we have Clement Worrywart, which is a Gemhide Sliver, but only for creatures. And it also has another unique ability that allows you to return a creature you control to your hand when you cast another creature. This does not come up very often. However, we have a few synergies where you could reset enters the battlefield effects like this. Or we have cards later on that also have enters the battlefield effects that you could attempt to use again. So now that we have lands, we have ramp, we're going to move on to how are we drawing cards? Well, like I said, we're going to use a lot of attacks. So here we have a couple enchantments that just draw a card when they deal combat damage. This one comes with some protection, which is very important for Grolnok specifically. We are aggressively trying to search for and protect Grolnok because it's the best draw engine in the deck. We have a little bit more of a broad array of deals combat damage, draw card. It's for all of your creatures. Enters the battlefield as well. This one, you can just cycle away if you don't need it. And then having Death Touch really helps you actually get in there and draw your cards, because most of your creatures are lower value than your opponents. We do recognize this is a snake. This is not a frog, obviously, which is very sad. However, frogs and snakes, I feel like they're in the same vein. So we call that good. We have a few more draw cards here. We have Distant Melody and Pact of the Serpent, both which let you choose a creature type, which is going to be frog, and draw cards equal to the amount of that type. Pact of the Serpent, you're going to lose some life. Distant Melody is going to cost you another mana. And then we just have Mystic Remora because it's just a nice, efficient enchantment that can also proc Tatsunari. We have some frog draw engines. They all do very different things, so we're just going to go through them one by one. We have Grolnok. Grolnok is the most important card in this deck. If Grolnok was Sultai, Grolnok would be the commander. Whenever a frog you control attacks, you mill 3 cards. Whenever a permanent is put into your graveyard, you exile it with a Croak counter, and you can play lands and cast spells you own from exile with Croak counters on them. This card is great because all of your frogs are milling you 3, and most of your deck is permanents. So you're going to be more likely than not essentially drawing 3 cards off of each attack. This is the main way that you gain card advantage in this deck. There is not a lot of raw card draw in this deck, so this is a very important card to seek out. We have a very weak one here with when it enters, you tap up to 1 target creature. It's usually going to be the Entrancer himself, and then you draw 2 cards. It's that easy. You can reset it with Clement, or you can just kind of let it be a little way to draw cards with some frogs. We have a Psychic Frog, recently banned in Legacy, I believe, which is pretty cool. Just a simple way to draw some cards. We don't really care about his other 2 abilities. However, being able to have evasion and also the ability to gain some more counters could be very good with Infect later in the game. We have Gitrog Ravenous Ride. This is a great one for allowing you to draw and ramp. With Saddle 1, you are very easily able to saddle your Kaimi and sacrifice it in order to draw 3 and put up to 3 lands from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. With the amount of enchantments you play, you can then just recur Kaimi by playing another enchantment. This way, you always have something to saddle Gitrog Ravenous Ride with. We have 20-Toed Toad here, which is another win condition. However, we never win with this card. It is usually a lightning rod for removal, but we mostly care about just the small buff that it does to 20-Toed Toad, and it just allows us to draw a card. We like doing both of those things, so it's in the deck, and it's a frog. We have Polywog Prodigy, which whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell with mana value less than Polywog Prodigy's power, we draw a card, and it has evolved. So it's going to get a little bit bigger as time goes on, and it just allows us to draw some cards, kind of like a weird Rhystic Study. We then have Urg, Spawn of Turg, which is probably our weakest engine, that I call it. And this just allows you, mainly we care about the second line of text there, which just allows you to look at the top card of your library, your upkeep, and put it into your graveyard if you like. This is just a nice way to have some card selection, while potentially being a reasonably sized beater. And it's also a frog. And then lastly, we have the Gitrog Monster, which most people know what the Gitrog Monster does. Being able to play extra lands is really nice. We don't have that many extra lands in the deck. In fact, I don't believe we have any. I believe we play 36 exactly. So we're not really trying to leverage that as much. However, when lands hit the graveyard, you draw a card. So what's really great about this is Grolnok. Cards hit the graveyard and then are exiled. This is not a replacement effect. So the cards hit the graveyard. Gitrog draws you a card, and then they go into the Croak Zone, your exile. I call it the Croak Zone. That's not what it's called, where you can then cast them. So this little engine here of these 2 cards allows you to accumulate tons and tons of value off of your frogs. So with your frog value out of the way, we need a way to end the game. We're going to end the game in my favorite way. Most people's not favorite way, but it's Infect, folks. You know them, you love them, or hate them. They are all the ways to give other creatures Infect. We do not play any Infect creatures because they are not frogs. It's as plain and simple as that. But all of these allow us to give our larger frogs Infect, or our smaller frogs to get over the line, especially Triumph of the Horde, something like that. Corrupted Conscience is obviously still great for stealing other people's creatures, though generally we're just trying to use it as an overcosted Phyresis because it is way more flavorful to win with an infecting frog, because it's like a poison dart frog. Yeah, that's the bit. That's why we play the cards. It's supposed to be the joke. So there's really not much to that. I'm not going to really go over the Infect cards because that's really all they're there for. Some of them are enchantments though, so they proc Tatsunari. So what are we trying to equip with these Infect? Well, it's going to be these 4. These are our strongest endgame frogs. Froghemoth will slowly get larger as you attack your opponents and exile cards from their graveyards. It's a decent little graveyard hate as well, and it can gain you some life, which is really great, and gets bigger over time. Rampant Frogantula will also gain +10/+10 for each player who's lost the game, which immediately means once one player is out, this is now a one-shot with Infect. Yargle is not a one-shot, unfortunately, but becomes a one-shot with Tainted Strike, giving it +1/+0, or Triumph of the Hordes, giving it +1/+1, and then you can make it unblockable. Yargle and Multani is pretty much a one-shot with Infect no matter what you do. But it is a vanilla creature, so you're going to have to get it over the line with something like your unblockable ability here. We're going to have to find ways to remove our opponent's stuff so that we can continue to play the game. And 99% of it is frog-themed, because it wouldn't be a frog deck without some frog-themed removal. Starting with Turn to Frog. Target creature loses all abilities and becomes a 1/1 blue frog until the end of the turn. These are mainly used to block incoming attacking creatures. It can also be nice to shut off somebody's value engine, but the majority of the time we're just using it to trade favorably with our frogs into our opponent's creatures. We have Polymorph Suggests to do this to an entire opponent's board. I have blown out many a board from turning them all into 1/1 frogs and then blocking them with my slightly larger frogs. We also have Kasmina's Transmutation for a more permanent approach to a single target. Notice it does not become an actual frog, however a frog is depicted on the art. And we also have Frogify, which is the exact same text, except it also becomes a blue frog. So these are very obviously very similar effects. So this is an honorary include due to the frog on the art, and we all know what's going on. We also have a copy with Storm in Amphibian Downpour, Flash, Storm, and then the same effect as Kasmina's Transmutation and Frogify. So this one's just great for being able to shut down a large amount of your opponent's creatures, similar to Polymorph Suggest, so long as they have cast more spells. Rarely do I actually cast this in my own turn because you're not actually casting a ton of spells in this deck because your frogs are a little more costed than maybe the average spell should be. Then we have Rapid Hybridization for a more permanent approach. You destroy the creature and then they get a 3/3 Frog Lizard. We also have Incubation and Incongruity, which has the same effect as Rapid Hybridization except for exile. And then in a pinch, you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck and reveal any number of creatures from among them, put them into your hand. The rest go on the bottom. So in a pinch, it's a little bit of draw to refuel your frogs. We also have another piece of removal. Beast Within destroys target permanent, and they get a 3/3 green beast. Now you're saying, what is this doing in the deck other than just being a good card? Well, back in the day, before frog was a creature type, there were actually the Anarids, which were then eroded to be frogs. However, they were beasts before. So I consider this slightly to be a frog card, simply because of that little fact. We also have a single way to deal with artifacts and enchantments because, we need something. It's an enchantment itself, so we can proc it off Tatsunari to get our Kaimi, which is pretty nice. And then we have a singular board wipe, which is Kindred Dominance. Obviously, just kind of the best one for a tribal deck. So destroying creatures that aren't frogs is pretty great. It hits your commander, but if you're left with a pile of frogs, we don't really care. There is one minor flaw in Tatsunari for its main effect we care about. That is that they can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach. So we kind of need ways to get around that. We have this one here in Bower Passage. Creatures with flying can't block creatures you control. So now you only have to worry about creatures with reach, which is a small amount of creatures. We also have Long River Lurker. When Long River Lurker enters, target creature you control can't be blocked till the end of the turn. This is great for creatures with Infect, and then whenever it deals combat damage, you can exile it and return it to the battlefield under your control, so you can flicker it. We don't have a lot of enters the battlefields that we're trying to abuse, but the few that we have, it could be very nice if we don't have a creature with Infect, just to get that enters the battlefield trigger again. As far as unblockability goes, we also have Canopy Cover, which provides hexproof as well, which is really nice. It can't be blocked except by creatures flying or reach, which is exactly Tatsunari's ability, but it's nice to not have to pay that 2 every single time. Also, being able to give hexproof to Grolnok is very important, as I've said before. Moving into more of the untargetability here, we have Alexi's Cloak, which has Flash and gives the creature Shroud. This is another way that we're trying to protect Grolnok, because it's that important to the strategy. And then we have a little bit of frog protection here in Plaxcaster Frogling. It has Graft 3, so whenever a creature comes into play under your control, you can move a +1/+1 counter from Plaxcaster to that creature. And then for 2, you can have target creature with a +1/+1 counter on it gain hexproof. Or it can't be the target spells or abilities this turn. Oh, it's Shroud, actually. So, a little worse, something you'll have to keep an eye out for when you're playing. But it rarely comes up, and it's just a nice on-board way to protect your frogs that have +1/+1 counters on them. On to a few more niche items. This just rounds out the rest of the deck. We have Patriarch's Bidding, Pyre of Heroes, and Neoform. Patriarch's Bidding, obviously, each player chooses a creature type and then returns all creatures of that type to the battlefield from the graveyard. We're naming frogs. We're going to get a lot of value out of this. As long as we're not playing against tribal decks, we are going to get the most value out of this. Obviously, we can't guarantee that, but we're going to bank on it because it's a fun and splashy effect. Pyre of Heroes and Neoform kind of move along in the same vein here. So they search for a creature with +1 mana cost equal to the creature you sacrifice to their ability, or their cost here. This is another way to get out Grolnok. We're looking for Grolnok aggressively, but we don't want to play too many generic tutors, because generic tutors just lead to your game being a little more boring, because you're playing the same cards over and over again. The Pyre of Heroes actually has a small little combo here that we will get to in a moment, so we're just going to slide that right up there. As far as some other miscellaneous frogs here, we have to have our Fog Frogs. We love a good Fog Frog. Spore Frog, sack it, prevent all combat damage. Haze Frog has Flash, then the same effect on enters the battlefield. So, we have reached our silly little combo here. It does not include Haze Frog. However, it includes Pyre of Heroes, Spore Frog, and another fun card, Anorid Scavenger. So, at the beginning of your upkeep, you have to sacrifice Anorid Scavenger. Notice here's one of our frogs that is a beast. But you have to sacrifice him unless you put a card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. So, fun little thing you can do here is if you have an enchantment, say a reconnaissance mission. That is a lot of mana, but okay. As long as you have an enchantment to play every turn, you can, let's say you play your enchantment. Cool. And you have Tatsunari. Tatsunari makes Kaimi. That's great. We love that. You can sacrifice your Spore Frog whenever you need to prevent your combat damage. The Spore Frog goes to your graveyard. At the beginning of your next turn, you can choose to put Spore Frog back into your deck. Then, you can pay 2 and sacrifice your Kaimi. You search for a creature with +1 mana equal to the sacrificed creature. So, this is a 0-drop. You can then go get your Spore Frog again. So now, all you have to do is play an enchantment, get your Kaimi back, and you can Spore Frog one opponent each turn, so long as you have an enchantment that you can play from your hand. Obviously not the craziest combo you've ever seen. You can play some enchantments that you can return to your hand if you want to cement this combo in the deck. I personally choose just to have it as a small little include. It's a silly thing that I've gotten going only a couple of times in the couple of years that I've had it together. But it's just something to think about when you're playing, that you can work towards that. We round it out with a couple more random frogs that I just think are neat. So, we will talk about all of them. Leapfrog, having flying if you cast an instant or sorcery. This is great to put a Tainted Strike on, because it then becomes a 4/1 with Flying and Infect, which is kind of crazy. Croaking Counterpart is the best creature on the board, except it's a 1/1 frog, so you can copy your opponent's draw engines, like an Esper Sentinel or something. Omnibian is a great way to block really big creatures and trade them with your Kaimi. Since it's a 3/3, you can tap this to make your opponent's creature a 3/3, and then you block it with Kaimi. And that way you can have some more removal, or you can use this in more of a negotiating way, kind of hold this up. Be like, I'll turn something into a 3/3 frog for you, so that you can block and kill it, and you can kind of move around the board like that. People will be much more hesitant to attack, or they might want to make a deal with you so that you don't end up killing their creature. Galloping Lizrog is just kind of big. When it enters the battlefield, you can remove any number of +1/+1 counters from among creatures you control, and then put twice that many on Galloping Lizrog. This works great with Infect. We have a couple +1/+1 counter synergies, so that's how we make that work. We have Krakenara, which has Evolve, so whenever a creature comes under my control with greater power or toughness, it gets a +1/+1 counter. It can get sort of big, but it never really gets that big. It's just a nice little guy in there. It's also a Crocodile Frog, which is pretty nice. And then we have obviously the most broken card in the entire deck. Some are calling for it to be banned. It is Bloated Toad. Bloated Toad, for 2 and a green, is a 2/2 with protection from blue. But most importantly in this deck, because you can discard it from your hand for 2 mana to draw a different card, which is almost entirely what I do with it. However, it is one of my favorite cards because it says the words Bloated Toad on it. And that is the entire reason that it is in the deck. You can replace this with another frog if you would prefer. So, that is the entire deck for you. Please let me know what you think about my Tatsunari Toad Rider Frog Tribal deck in the comments. If you have any questions about the deck, let me know. And let me know how we can all band together to try and get Bloated Toad banned for its sheer power alone. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.